From high atop the city of Philadelphia on the 52nd floor of the BNY Mellon Bank Center and the Content Club studio in the Pyramid Club of Philadelphia, this is Storytelling with a Purpose. I'm your host, Jim DeLorenzo, the principal of Jim DeLorenzo Public Relations. And through this show, I want to illustrate how storytelling with a purpose is integral to my lifelong vocation, storytelling in public relations, with conversations that highlight best practices, tactics, and strategies behind the process, how storytelling works in a professional setting, what goes into it, and how it can move the listener, the viewer, or the reader to some action. Today, I will be looking at the way storytelling works in personal branding, career development, and business development with my friend Charley Timmins. Charley is the What's Next guy, the principal at Personal Marketing Associates, LLC, for the past 23 years. Charley collaborates with talented executives and professional service providers to help them stand out in crowded markets to attract right fit opportunities within right fit organizations and working with right fit clients and colleagues. Charley collaborates with his clients to identify their authentic difference, craft authentic messaging, develop a go-to-market strategy, and execute each step to advance their career, their practice, their business to secure work that makes a difference. And I'm a fortunate alumnus of Charley's program. Thank you, Charley, for taking the time to be with us today.
My
really
pleasure,
appreciate
Jim.
it.
Happy to be here.
We were talking before we started rolling here, and one of the things that shown for me in our conversations over the course of 2 years that we worked together is the notion of authenticity and the way you inspire storytelling that helps bring that authenticity to the surface. And it's really impacted my work and my career and my life. But I wanted to ask if you could share with our listeners and our viewers some of the things that way storytelling works in your professional work as a personal branding coach, personal marketing development. You really have a very comprehensive program, and I know that it's evolved since the pandemic, and it reached even greater heights or depths, if you will. Can you tell me a little bit more about one of the things we talked about was know, like, trust.
Absolutely.
Those 3 words. You want people to know you, to like you, to trust you. And that's a given in almost any interaction, any relationship. But
Absolutely.
How does it actually build into the personal branding and getting your own story out there to people who you want to know you, to like you, to trust you?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. If you recall, when you and I got together, it was before the pandemic.
Yes.
And we were talking back then about Jim being authentic, that people buy Jim. They don't buy PR. They buy Jim.
Right.
Because if they don't trust Jim, they're not going to work with Jim. So how does Jim earn that trust in short interactions with people on your website, your LinkedIn, things of that nature? That's what we really focused on.
Yes.
And the answer lies within. The answer doesn't lie out there. It lies within you. You already have the answer to that. So we'll definitely touch upon that today. What the pandemic has done is it's really put a heavy accent on authenticity. People want to deal with authentic people. People that normally did face-to-face business now had to go online, on Zoom, wherever they went.
Right.
So that particular channel was overwhelmed with people pitching things, if you will.
Right.
And as a result, people became sort of burned out in listening to all of these pitches about the greatest, the wonderful, et cetera, the world's greatest coach, the world's most successful entrepreneur. All those types of things wore people out. And over time, the people that broke through that noise is the people that were themselves. They were natural. They were being vulnerable. They were telling stories that reached the heart first and then the head second, because decisions
Absolutely.
are made first in the heart,
Yep.
in the gut, and then they're rationalized in the brain. So how do you touch that? really. We're all born into a story, Jim. We're born into it, whether it's the immigrant story, the Ward and June Cleaver story, or even the Alex Keaton story. We're
Sure.
born into a story, but we're not destined to stay in that particular story. As we go through life, if you were the first person in your family to go to a university, your life is different than any siblings you have, any parents that you have. Your story changes. And we have to reflect on our lives to understand, what has that journey been like? What is the story that I want to be able to tell people that motivates them, inspires them to see me as a possible solution to some of the challenges that are happening. So we're facing that all the time. See, we're in the business of moving people from where they are to the point of view that we want them to adopt, to accept us, our ideas, our products, our services, and primarily ourselves.
Right.
If they're not buying into us, they're not buying. It's that simple.
I always used, in the past, I used the Popeye analogy. I am what I am, and that's all what I am. And not many people remember Popeye these days, but it's really all about being your most authentic self and bringing that out in the open so that people know you and want to be with you and want to do things with you. You talked about, and I've incorporated this into my everyday thinking, that heart share, as you described,
Right.
that leads to mind share. Once you get the heart share, then you can work your way to the mind share, but you really have to get that heartfelt connection first. One of the things we were talking about recently was finding that story within them, not making up a story out of whole cloth, manufacturing, to use a dirty word, if you will, but uncovering the gem that's there, finding that nugget of a story that you can then elaborate on and bring to the surface. I often use now use the phrase that I'm a private investigator who works in public relations. I'm going to find out the story,
There you go.
and then I'm going to tell that story.
Yep.
But how do you work with your clients and your colleagues? How do you work with them to bring out those stories, bring out that hidden gem, if you will?
Well, when I meet somebody for the first time, we spend some time together, maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and I have them tell me their story. No, I don't say it that
Right.
way. I say, well, tell me about yourself. Where have you been? What got you here? And they start to tell me the story. And I'm either underwhelmed or I'm very inspired by them.
Okay.
It's usually the former, because the story that they're telling is not the story they should be telling in order to motivate people to buy into them, to want to help them buy what they have, or refer them to the people of influence that can be of help to them. So when I listen to that, I'm listening to somebody give me a bunch of facts and figures and dates and times that mean nothing. They
Right.
don't connect with my heart. It's all facts. Jim, you know that facts tell. It's stories that sell us,
Right.
that get people to buy into us. And I'm not saying selling us in like you pitch yourself idea. It's that people want to trust people. And in my line of business, they're taking their careers, their livelihoods, they want to improve them over what they have now. And they need somebody that they can feel comfortable with and trust to do that. So, example, one of the things that I do when I meet people for the first time, they usually say to me, Charlie, how long have you been doing this kind of work? Because again, they're looking for credibility. They're
Sure.
looking for professionalism. They have their little checklists that they're going through. So I think about it and I say, first grade. And they laugh and they say, oh, no. I said, no, seriously. My earliest recollection of doing the kind of work I did was first grade. Do you want to hear
I remember this, but please.
Do you want to hear a story?
I sure do.
And they always say, sure, I'll tell a story. I said, here I was in first grade. I was in a classroom of 60 boys and girls, all Catholics, either Irish Catholic or Italian Catholic. And Catholics have a way of managing large groups.
Right.
Everybody's in alphabetical order. They're in their school uniform, and there's one person running the show. Now, she was about 8 feet tall. She had this thing on her head that was about a foot tall.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Sister St. Martin, her name was. God rest her soul. And she was running it like a drill sergeant. She knew exactly what to do. Because, Jim, back in the day, you only moved as fast as your slowest student.
Right.
So when somebody got finished and they started to get antsy in their seat, she would deploy them over to help that particular person get unstuck and move forward. So it's a 21st century concept called mentorship, but she used it in the 20th century.
Right.
So one day, I was finished whatever we were working on, and she said, Timmy, that was my nickname. She said, Timmy, go over and help Mary Ellen. And all of a sudden I froze. Mary Ellen Bracken. She was the smartest and prettiest girl in the class.
Right.
And I'm going to go over there and help her. She said, Timmy, go help Mary Ellen's. So I grabbed my chair, started pulling my chair. Now, I'm a T, so I'm up against the window.
Right.
She's a B. She's up against the chalkboard, right? So I have to drag my chair. Now, why is the chair movable? Because back in the day, we would hide under our desks
Right.
because the Russians were going to drop the big one.
Exactly.
Right?
Duck and cover.
Exactly right. So I dragged the chair around and sat down next to her, and she gave me this look like, what are you doing here? You know? So I was chubby Charlie at that time. So it wasn't very welcoming, but we got to get down to business, helping her with, I don't know what it wasn't math, but I don't know what the topic was.
Okay.
Well, in a short period of time, she sat bolt upright. She got it.
Right.
That light bulb moment. It went off. Everything made sense at that particular point. And little old me helped her, right? But she turned to me. She looked at me with these big blue eyes and this beautiful auburn hair. And she flashed me this huge smile. Like, I got it. Jim, I live for those smiles.
Yes.
Because that's what I want to help people do, have breakthroughs. Usually they're stuck. They're in second gear. Things aren't working in life. And they need somebody to help them sort of figure it out. We have to get clarity about that. And once they have that light bulb moment, there's hope. There's a future. So when I start to work with somebody, we take a journey to get very clear about them.
Sure.
Most people, they try to implement solutions before they understand themselves. So what are their values? What do they stand for? What's their unique value proposition? They need to understand that because people buy them, not what they do, but them and why they do it. So if they don't understand those things, they're not going to make that particular heart connection.
Absolutely.
So there's about 12 or 13 areas that we need to examine very carefully so that they understand their story better. Because when we compile that story, it needs to echo those values, what they stand for. So the story I just told you said lots of things about me without me even mentioning it.
Absolutely.
Because you saw that story unfolding. We all have a story or two like that about ourselves. That's the story we should be telling instead of going through a laundry list of the wonderful projects that we solved for that employer who we may have forgotten about or want to forget about.
Right.
Because we weren't happy there.
That's why we're not. It's why we're not there anymore.
That's why you chose to step away, Jim.
It's funny that you tell that story because that story certainly helped me in learning more about you. And I my own personal experience with you was that you helped me find what I now refer to as my lifelong vocation of public relations and storytelling, because I began to realize that I was doing that type of thing in kindergarten, first grade, and it's been part of my life ever since. So helping to find that authentic moment in time where it all started to come together is one of the great things that I found with you. And when we talk about developing your personal brand and your own story, that's the same way we try to find the messaging and the story for a brand, a consumer brand or a business brand. And I think that that's a very interesting way of approaching it, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about it that way anymore. You're one of the few people that I know that shares my philosophy of that uncovering the true story.
When I began to tackle this personal branding thing, I think it was around 2007, my coach introduced me to it. I said, I already know all about that stuff, but because what doing a brand looks like to a lot of people is just a fresh coat of paint on a rotting building. I'm going to rebrand it. We're going to no, that's superficial. We're talking about deep inside. We already have a brand. We need to discover it. How do we discover it? Our past tells us a lot about who we are, what we deliver, what value we have. Those answers are already inside. And I have to ask the right questions to tease from you those answers so that you go, oh my goodness, I've known this all along.
Sure.
It's not something you make up and you manufacture. Without the technology I used to sort of make it up for people. You know, Jim, it sounds like your brand is, and usually I was pretty correct, but I knew it wasn't fact-based. There was there wasn't enough evidence for me to be 100% certain that what I was sharing was dead on. Now I'm able to do that with people because they are discovering it. I'm guiding them on that journey. When you discover it, you own it, you believe in it. And when you speak confidently about yourself and your brand, what happens is people perceive you as competent, as capable. So that whole connection, It moves from the heart to the head.
Right.
It's incredible the way it works.
And it's funny that we talk about the facts, telling the facts, getting the numbers out there. And from 1993 to 1995, I did this. Nobody really cares about the timeline. Nobody really cares about the bullet points. What they care about is what's behind those bullet points. What they care about is that, as you said, they want to like you. They want to trust you. They want to get to know more about you. I think it's funny when we talk about putting a fresh coat of paint on and letting it stay at that. A lot of people, as we talked about along the way, before the pandemic and before the age of Zoom and video calls and things like that, there was a lot of, as you describe it, fake it till you make it.
Correct.
And I think one of the great lessons from the pandemic and the lockdowns was something that I had started telling my colleagues and my clients before the pandemic, was that whether you realize it or not, you're on camera wherever you go. And now that we have the cameras in our laptops and in our cell phones where we're communicating with people at great distances or even relatively short distances, instead of meeting in person face to face, we're meeting people face to face, but it's through technology. And if you're all surface gloss and shallow projection, people get turned off right away. We're more media savvy than we've ever been. We know what the tricks are. Most of us know what the tricks are. And most of us know when we're being fooled or when they're trying to fool us.
Right.
And one of the great lessons of my time working with you has been that fact that you want to be an authentic person. You want to be the person you want to be the person you want people to see. You know, you were joking about the first grade and the shirts and ties and uniforms. I've kind of adopted the uniform that I started with in kindergarten at Incarnation in Trenton, with a jacket and tie every day. You know, and I think that's how I want people to see me.
That's your brand,
right? And working with you helped me steer into that, if you will. Help me realize that's who I am.
Well, we have to give ourselves permission to be ourselves.
Right.
We learn at an early age that we have to be somebody else. In essence, who's the top salesman? I'm going to do what that person does. Or what's the best way I'm going to perform on a basketball court? Am I going to be LeBron? Am I going to be Maxey? Am I going to be Embiid? We mimic other people because they're successful. If it works for them, it's going to work for me.
Right.
And that usually ends up with disappointment.
Yeah, because you're borrowing that personality or borrowing that image and trying to fit yourself into it.
Jim, in your case, when you sense that people are less than genuine with you, what happens to you emotionally?
I shut down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you shut the heart down.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll keep listening and nodding, but the heart is disengaged.
The heart is disengaged, and the other thing is the gut reaction. You know, there have been times where I've tried to ignore my gut reaction, and I paid the price for it. I've learned through experience that my gut reactions are usually correct.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It's true.
and to learn to trust that reaction and to learn to embrace, okay, this is not going to work. I know this right away. Let's just not commit too much to this. So if I shut my heart down, I can still listen,
Right.
but I'm not as interested as I was at the beginning of the
True.
exchange.
Right. Something happened, and if people weren't privy to this conversation, they wouldn't know why they feel that way.
Right.
Right. Because again, you're not the person you're talking to is not being their true self. And that's one of the things that came out of this whole pandemic is people like people that are vulnerable, people that share their true self. They're not trying to put on a phony face in order to get you to like them. I mean, I did that for large portions of my life. It just
Sure.
doesn't work. It eventually catches up. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. You know what I mean? So just
Yes.
but finding that that's the journey that most people don't take. So I want you to imagine, 3 or 4 concentric circles, not concentric, like a Venn diagram.
Right.
And in the first circle, you got to pay attention to what I call clarity. You have to be clear about yourself. Jim is a service for sale. So if you're not clear about it, features, benefits, the how, the what, how is you going to communicate that to anybody?
Sure.
The next thing is that Jim aligns with what audience, what market. So in marketing, we know that, you may think you have dog food, but if the dogs don't eat it, it ain't dog food.
Right.
Right? So you're looking at the ideal market. Who's my niche? Who is the ideal customer? What are the psychographics? What are the demographics? Now you have that, you can align that with who you are. So now the probability of success goes up. So now we can work on content, language, words to motivate people, to get them intrigued about us, to draw them to us. And then in that third circle, that's where you engage. That's where you convert the conversation into a client, as you do so well. And then what happens is now, how do we keep working on ourselves and grow? Because the market's going to change.
Sure.
Your brand has to adapt to it. Your brand is your core, who you are. That'll never change, but you have to adapt because there are things about you that may become more important in the future to the market than they are today.
That's a very good point. And I think that core that doesn't change, again, I relate that to, we have all these different technologies that are at our fingertips now. Those are the things that are always changing. But the core of what you're trying to do on all those different technologies is the story that you want to tell.
Exactly right.
And that core doesn't change. The story doesn't change. The elements of the story may change, and the way you tell the story might change, but the basic story, the core of any messaging is the story.
There's been a lot of discussion about this AI stuff
Yes.
as it relates to copywriters and people like that. What hasn't been perfected yet in AI is emotion.
Right.
So you can ask AI to write a story or press release or whatever for you, but it doesn't contain a soul. It's like kissing stainless steel. It's just has no feeling to it, has no personality. That's where your brand, that's where you're going to infuse into that so people feel you. They get a sense of who you really are.
Right.
And if you don't know who you are, you don't know how to express it properly.
Yeah, and you want, as I'm seeing here, and I hope I share with people in conversations, you want them to see the passion you have for the subject, or the passion that you have for what you're doing and what you're about and what your life is like. You want them to see that emotion, and you want to be able to share that emotion through written word, through video, through audio, through photos. You want to be able to share that passion, that true emotion, that authenticity, without sacrificing it to chatbot or whatever it might be, which is going to be that artificial intelligence, not the human intelligence, not that human emotion, that emotional intelligence.
I learned a mentor a long time ago said to me, Charlie, people will know you more by the questions you ask than the answers you give. Well, if you're just talking, you're not listening. What am I learning? I can tell you, I've never learned anything by talking. I learn it by listening, right? So what are the questions that you can ask that will tease out of people the answers they need to hear? Because they can't see what you hear. As they're talking, you're a very intuitive guy, Jim, and you can see the connections between the dots and the patterns that they can't see, but we have to get them to talk. And when they realize what you're doing and they feel connected with themselves, that's where the heart share kicks in, and this bond between you and them begins to be built.
And the other part of that, Charlie, is if you can show people that you are listening and you heard them. That's one of the reasons why very early on in the lockdown Zoom era, I realized that I couldn't be on camera with a person and have my head down writing notes and then look back up. And when I recorded one of those calls, when I was doing that, I was very disappointed to see the top of my head in the screen.
Yep.
And I said to myself, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's when I started recording my Zoom calls, and I started generating transcripts. And then when I would have my written communication back to the person that I had just spoken with, I could share with them, I heard what you were saying here, and I would quote back to them exactly what they had said to me in my writing. And I would say, when you talked about this, what I heard was this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how I think I can help. And that added a level of authenticity and engagement that I don't think people at the time using Zoom for the first time or the second time or the third time really understood that that was a way to change that. I talked to a recruiter here in Philadelphia, a big-time recruiter. And he was doing all these interviews for his clients on Zoom, but he was doing just what I was telling you. He had his head down, he was writing notes, and he did. So I said to him, and one of the reasons why I like this format for our show as well is put the computer on a platform, have the camera on, but just look at the camera, look at the person that you're talking to through the screen, and don't be distracted by writing notes or looking down or looking around. So make that your focus. That person that's on that screen is your focus at that time. And he said that changed the way he did his recruiting interviews. And I felt very happy about that because it was something that I had learned along the way that I thought, well, maybe this will help him. But that authenticity, that connection, you can't be doing that if you're constantly looking down at your notebook.
It reminds me of a story. I was investigating a particular certification that I might want to get. And so I had a preliminary meeting with this gentleman who, from this organization. We had a very, very good meeting. He said, let's set up a follow-up meeting in about a week. So we set up a follow-up meeting. We got on the phone, and he started the meeting, and he said, in our last meeting, you told me these kind of things. And I'm saying, my God, this guy's got an incredible memory because he wasn't looking down at a piece of paper. And I said, stop. I said, Drew, what, you remember everything? Oh, I recorded it. He had an AI application that summarized all the key points.
Sure.
My point was, it didn't cause me to be any less connected to him. Actually, it increased it because he thought enough of me. He cared enough about me to really listen, because the questions he asked, he could have only asked if he was not writing. Because he was hearing things that he needed to hear about me and what made me different so that he could address those.
Engaged listening.
Yeah, it's a great term. Great term, yeah.
Engaged listening. When you and I met, I was dealing with discomfort with my career and where I was, and I learned a lot about myself through the process with you. And I think that's one of the most valuable things I've ever done was the year and a half or so that we spent working together on that. And I really think that the personal brand approach, that idea of working on your personal brand, uncovering the real story of you that's already there,
Correct.
has helped me to uncover the real stories about the people that I'm working with and to tell more authentic and genuine stories about them, where I can engage in heart share for people who want to do business with them or people who want to connect with them. And I think that that's something that certain generation of public relations and marketing professionals have overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Because even with the lockdown and then the post-lockdown world, there is a reluctance to engage one-on-one. There is a reliance on sending email, sending text messages.
Right.
We don't talk on the phone anymore. We just exchange voicemails, or we text them and say, "Can I talk to you?" And nothing will ever replace one-to-one communication. So I think I was just speaking with a colleague for another episode of this show about social media. And it's all about engaging with people.
Right.
It's not about engaging with an algorithm. It's engaging with a person on a one-to-one or on a audience, specific audience level. But you want them to engage with you. And only through the authentic storytelling and emotional connection can you really engage with people in an effective way.
That's the goal. That's what you're trying to accomplish when you're talking to them. You're trying to make that connection because, again, you want people to open up to you, to share with you what the real issues are. The reason they may be talking to you initially is only a symptom of a much deeper issue.
Right.
And if you can help them get to that issue, they're incredibly grateful. And you got them there. And so that builds that emotional connection with you. That's part of your brand. Curiosity is part of Jim's brand. And it works very well in the profession that you're in. But you weren't always that way.
No.
Okay, because what happened is you had mentors. You did what other people did. I will be like Joe or Harry or Dominic or Mary. Wasn't Jim. You had to find your own voice.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what people need to do. Because when you find your voice, you know it. You feel comfortable. I've seen people give speeches or networking pitches, if you will, and they're just not comfortable in their own skin because it's not. They don't own the words. They don't own the concepts that they're using. So, part of the idea is I may give them a great idea. They say, "Charlie, I'm not comfortable with that."
Right.
And fine, let's work on it. Let's get comfortable. The concept is right. Yes. Okay. How would you say it? And eventually they'll find the right words.
Right. How do you embrace it, and how do you make it part of you?
Correct.
It's already there. All you need to do is just kind of find the way to tell it.
Exactly. Right.
Share it.
So with this ubiquity of the term personal brand, I've taken a step further and I said, no, authentic personal brand, right? Because everybody says we do personal branding, we do personal branding. I was on a call the other day where a fellow was talking about people's LinkedIn and you have to put your personal brand on LinkedIn. And he said your brand is what you do, how you do it, and what people get out of it. And I'm listening to him. I'm waiting for the most important piece,
Right.
which is why do you do what you do? That's where the connective tissue is, not what you do and how you do it, what they're going to get out of it. Then you sound like everybody else. What's going to differentiate you? There's only one Jim DeLorenzo. And we have to find out what that difference is and be able to communicate that. They're not going to find it anywhere else. If they want that, they have to do business with Jim.
I think it was you that shared this with me. I attribute it to you, is that, someone comes to you and says, I want to be like Tony Robbins.
Right.
And you say, well, that spot's already taken.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins is Tony Robbins.
Correct.
What's Jim DeLorenzo? What's
Right.
Charley Timmins?
Right.
Why don't you try to be the next Jim DeLorenzo? Type
That's right.
of thing. And I like that. I like that thought process because it really does. People come to you all the time and want to be like somebody that they've admired in the media.
Sure.
Or on TV or in movies or something. And yes, it's great to have them as a example, but you can't take that spot. That spot's already taken.
Yeah, it's true.
I love it.
Yeah.
Charlie, I really want to thank you for your time today. I think I still continue to learn a lot from you, and I hope other people will learn a lot from you as well.
You're a teacher to me, Jim. Thank you. I appreciate coming on the show, and I hope that what we talked about today could benefit a few people.
I think it will.
Wonderful.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you all here again very, very soon.